Welcome to the R4D series, Research for Development. Like mentioned before in R4D1, Research for Development 1 video, I chose R4D to relate to the term R&D that we all know, research and development. And I have always noticed that research and development are usually absent in many educational communities worldwide. However, it is very important to mention as a disclaimer these 5 points. Point number 1 is that this series is about those key global research findings or report findings that we can all benefit from. So these are not my researches or reports. Point number 2 is that the target here is to encourage and drive inquiry in our schools. Point number 3 is that there are definitely limitations, and these are related to country and the education system involved, organizations and institutions conducting the report or the research, their conditions respectively, the time of publication, the time limit of the video itself, and so on. Point number 4 is the ethics, the ethical code, and this is paramount. So please note that we are taking into consideration the objectivity, correct information presented, and respect to all parties and all laws and rules of the organizations involved. Point number 5 is the research citation, and this is dictated by point number 4. Citation is extremely important, and I will include the citation in the presentation and the description below. You are definitely encouraged to check the citation and read the full report for more information. So starting with an overview, this is about a report published by the NCEE, or the National Center on Education and Economy, mainly based from 2021 International Summit on the Teaching Profession ISTP. The title of the publication, Learning from the Past, Looking to the Future, Excellence and Equity for All. 62 pages for the support. Time of publication, it was published in December 3rd, 2021, but it was based on the ISTP, the summit that took place in October 2021. The tool that was used for this report is a convening. That was also what ISTP was. The involved group, education ministers, other government leaders, head of teachers organizations from 15 different countries. And the theme is using the past lessons to plan the future, and the targets. Mainly there were 2 targets: importance of unifying voices and identifying practical steps as policy implications and solutions studied and communicated by government leaders, policymakers, and teachers. So the potential questions, I'm choosing one potential question here: how can such a convening inspire us? And here first we have to start with ISTP. What is ISTP? ISTP stands for the International Summit on the Teaching Profession. It was initiated in 2011, bringing on the highest and the fastest improving countries. And it is usually a summit. It's usually co-hosted by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which we all know, the OECD, and one host country. In this case, 2021, this summit was hosted by the United States Department of Education. And something very important about the summit is that, and ISTP in general, is that they bring practical steps as policy implications and solutions. And this is what makes it unique and different from others. So the list of the ISTP 2021 participating countries: United States as the host country, Canada, Czech Republic, Estonia, Finland, Germany, People's Republic of China, Poland, Portugal, Singapore, Slovenia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. So the method. Now, it is a convening, it is a summit, it's a 3-day summit hosted by the 3 parties, and this is how it usually happens. And 2021 was just like that. It included virtual international sessions here in this case, and there were roundtables with 85 minutes discussions among delegations, country delegations, and 5 minutes for the rapporteur. Participants we're discussing to find actionable commitments that can serve all teachers and all learners. And this is very important. It's not only about learners, it's also about teachers. It targeted reflection on the past to bring practical solutions and steps in the present and evaluate the progress for 2022 ISTP. And that would definitely start happening after the consensus of the action plans. And it's important to note that the ISTP is only a summary of the proceedings to capture the themes, areas of consensus, and areas of discussion to build on them. And that's what makes it practical and unique and different from other summits. So the tools, like mentioned, there are country delegation meetings. They were conducted through virtual international sessions with general roundtables, and there were other virtual international sessions with in-depth roundtables. And the tool that was used was through the through the raise hand function. There were no prepared remarks. Prepared remarks were actually discouraged, and participants were given time limit for contribution for 3 minutes by each delegate country. This is to give voice to everybody. In the 2021 summit revolved around a central question: how can governments, teacher organizations, and schools as centers of their communities collaborate around the future of education and the whole child to build back better and provide an excellent education to all? And definitely this question leads to supporting questions, and the questions involved were the following 5 supporting questions. How does the teaching profession best support student well-being? How do we value and support the teaching profession and support the well-being of teachers, and what exact support do they need? What is needed to support each person's learning, including academics, with mental, physical health, and social emotional learning? How do governments and teacher organizations come together to determine the broader multidimensional measures of success that incorporate the whole child, and how can we achieve these successes? And question number 5, how can governments and teacher organizations collaborate on strategies that are relentlessly focused on equity to advance the future of education and to ensure an excellent education to all? Very interesting questions. And it's worth noting that for ISTP as a summit, it has general design principles, and these principles are what make the ISTP really unique among other summits and among other convenings. And these principles are those that keep this ISTP with this certain identity and keeps it consistent throughout all those years. And they are a forum for open dialogue between ministries and unions, a unity of purpose, a strong supporting data set, a dedication to international collaboration, a fruitful study experience for all, a laser focus on teaching and learning. And the previous results or notes, what we can call as key themes, starting 2011 through 2021. As we can see here, it started with United States actually in 2011 and 2012, improving teacher quality around the world, teaching and leadership for the 21st century. In the Netherlands in 2013, defining and evaluating teacher quality. In New Zealand, 2014, excellence, equity, and opportunity. In Canada, 2015, implementing highly effective teacher policy and practice. In Germany, 2016, teachers' professional learning and growth. In 2017, in the United Kingdom, empowering and enabling teachers to improve equity. 2018 in Portugal, new challenges and opportunities facing the profession. In Finland, 2019, the future of teaching and learning. And naturally in 2020, it was virtual summit, supporting teaching during times of crisis. And 2021, this year, United States hosting the summit, and it was also virtual. And the theme was learning from the past, looking to the future, excellence and equity for all. And you can easily see the progression starting from 2011 through 2021, and the themes were evolving in a very harmonious way. And we all hope that all this will really lead to whole child education that we all aspire. Intentional collaboration framework. And like mentioned before, the target of the ISTP was to reflect on how governments, how unions, how teachers, how schools could come together and bring together certain practices to support learners, to support particularly whole child education and the whole child agenda. So there was a long working session discussing that, and after that, and a session of brainstorming. And after all those topics brainstormed were brought to the table and analyzed, there was this framework that was proposed by Anthony McKay, the NCEE CEO and board chair, with Linda Darling-Hammond, the Learning Policy Institute president, and they actually presented it in a very clear and precise and direct way. The intention collaboration comprising the teacher professionalism and well-being and whole child education and equity. Of course, it's important to note, and they emphasize that collaboration is not just for the sake of collaboration. There must be some strategies taken so that the framework will be clear for everybody. And they explain types of collaborations, the collaborations among teachers within schools, across unions and governments, between schools and the districts, between education systems and other agencies like health and labor. And we have seen that actually it was truly critical during the crisis, during the pandemic, collaboration between government systems and broader societies and economies. And we also noticed how important that was during the crisis, relating all this to our economies, and of course collaborations across countries to solve global problems. So the conditions here for collaborations, they are not just collaborations for the sake of collaborations, they are here embodying mindset shifts, trust, respect of all the parties involved, significant time and resources needed, and definitely the responsibility, collective responsibility, and political will, as well as we see that governments here are involved, and this definitely includes governments and the government's contributions. So examples from international collaborations roundtables. This is just a selection. For example, with Canada, they spoke about the look at the future of education through an equity lens and including voices that have previously been ignored. Schools must be safe, inclusive places for all teachers, staff, students. Flexible curricula must allow teachers to exercise their professional capabilities. And I personally find this very important because the teachers, really all teachers around the world, were overwhelmed with their curricula, so they couldn't much handle with resilience whatever they had to handle when it came also to the social, emotional, and mental health of themselves and their learners. And I continue what Canada spoke about as well. The authentic indigenous curriculum must support truth and reconciliation. Poland, for example, the country took steps to enlist parents as allies who could help to diagnose and address the lasting psychological damage of COVID-19. Estonia, parents' trust in education increased during the pandemic as parents had begun to recognize the importance of the teaching profession. And this is very interesting because we all noticed that the teaching profession was just taken for granted in so many countries around the world. Scotland, policymakers are now working with teachers to find ways to document, aggregate, and disseminate these micro innovations. And this is so important because those innovations are usually, and we see it in schools and we see it in so many other countries, they are usually overlooked. And Sweden, for example, professional association leaders and ministry officials had begun to meet monthly during the pandemic to determine priority issue areas and decide on strategies for the coming months, which had never happened so regularly or intentionally before. So I guess that through the crisis, we had all to come together strategically and plan accordingly. So teachers' professionalism and well-being. And here there was a very clear message, loud and clear, that the mental health and teachers' well-being are so important, not only for the teachers themselves, but also for their students and for their achievement, and also the overall climate and culture in the school. And there was an impact for teachers' well-being, teacher retention, school climate, student well-being, and students' academic achievement. And they were speaking about the health, the mental health, happiness, sense of self-efficacy, creativity, ingenuity, capacity to exercise leadership. And these are strength points that can be boosted so that teachers' professionalism and well-being can truly come into place. And they definitely said that if leadership does not support this, then we cannot be saying that we are supporting teachers' professionalism and well-being. And examples from teacher professionalism and well-being roundtables, for example, in Singapore, putting structures in place to foster agency, and this includes technology platforms that can alleviate teachers' workloads to allow them to offer students more individualized support and guidance, as well as enable them to share lesson plans and resources and adapt them at their discretion. And I personally find this amazing because this will really lead to individualized teaching and assessment and learning and assessment. China, for example, the ministry requires that the average salary of teachers is no less than that of local civil servants, the government employees. This helps ensure that teachers are healthy and financially stable, while also elevating the social status of teachers. They were launching also a national level training program, building an ICT platform for teachers to share resources and best practices, and allocating 2.2 billion yuan to increase supports for rural teachers in the Western provinces. Switzerland, for example, set up an alliance for students and teachers focused on developing opportunities to exercise, play, and develop healthy habits. And that was a great opportunity for all of us to really point into that direction of health and good health practices. England, for example, they were investing in a longer-term mental health and well-being package for teachers, further working with school leaders to find ways to further reduce teachers' workload, and developing pilot ambassador schools, as they called it, that share best practices with other schools across the country. About whole child education and equity, and here it's very important, and they noted that in the report that neuroscience, it shows how important it is for whole child education when you are bringing together the teaching disciplinary concepts and skills, fostering cognitive development, social emotional development, physical health, and mental health. And when you are bringing all these together, then you are definitely comprising the various parts that a child should be attended for. And here they added that there should be, if the school cannot provide programs and supporting resources and the right people to handle all these facets, then it is definitely important to bring some kind of guidance from local communities, partnerships, etc. And this is really important. Examples from whole child education and equity roundtables. For example, in Germany, there was a new set of resources for improving the school culture and climate for students, such as diagnostic tools for helping schools to be more inclusive of different languages. And we know that Germany has lots of refugees, so they had an issue with those children who would be missing during the crisis, the German language support in schools. So they had to provide them with intervention. And I continue from the Germany roundtable, special support courses so students who have fallen behind can catch up, created and funded new positions for school psychologists as well as career counselors for students, building out a new suite of resources, guidelines, and best practices for blended learning. Czech Republic, making time and space for new forms of learning requires unraveling some preconceived notions about the kinds of activities that take place in the school, de-emphasizing some forms of examinations that have long characterized the education system. And I find this very important as well, because much of the hindrance that leadership and systems face is that this fixation of the same practices and finding it very difficult and challenging to change the old and replace it with the new. As for the United States of America, they said that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reimagine schools so that every public school offers an inclusive, safe, and welcoming environment in which educators and students thrive, collaborate, create, and excel. So the major themes that were brought, there were mainly three, and these involve both teacher professionalism and well-being and the whole child education. And they are the clear pathways for continuing learning for students and teachers. And this is through, for example, the pre-service preparation, professional development, peer-to-peer coaching, and sharing, etc. Holistic approach for health and wellness. And this is definitely when every teacher and every child can access all types of health, the physical health, mental health, wellness services provided in the school. Flexibility and resources for teachers to personalize learning for each student. And here definitely it means enabling the teachers to meet the diverse needs of their learners. Because this will create autonomy that we are all speaking about and which is fundamental now in the new learning processes. Major themes brought by Anthony McKay, for example, the board chair of the NCEE and the CEO, And I quote, conversation emerging here is that well-being is of the student and of the teaching profession. Well-being, physical and mental health, social and emotional learning, all are coming together in ways that are interdependent. And Linda Darling-Hammond, the Learning Policy Institute president, and I quote, collaboration should be a pathway to nothing less than envisioning school entirely. How can educators get from one to the other? Management of mistrust is expensive, redundant, and inefficient. Bureaucracy structures were intentionally built to minimize interpersonal trust and institute top-down leadership. Intentional collaboration deepens bilateral relationships, which in turn foster greater trust. It is also a powerful tool for professional learning and a key ingredient of developing professional expertise. That was a very important note. And the OECD Director of Education and Skills, Andreas Schleicher, he gave kind of pieces of advice for the participants, and by saying, and I quote, be transparent with teachers and school leaders where change is heading and what it means for them. Be aware of how organizational policies and practices can either facilitate or inhibit transformation. Tackle institutional structures that are built around the interests and habits of adults rather than learners. Use power and influence to build the alliances and coalitions needed to help rules become good practice and good practice become culture, end quote. And I find this very important because it is not only very practical, but it does tackle a very critical practice that we see in schools when the change sometimes hinders the transformation rather than facilitates it. And David Edwards, the General Secretary of Education International, and I quote, equity is useless if it remains an aspiration. Practical policies require collaboration, implementation, and accountability. As the next generation of young people will determine what happens with the climate crisis, it might be said that teacher and student well-being agenda is linked to the well-being of the planet itself, end quote. And I personally find this a very powerful message because we are always overlooking the factors that exist outside of our classrooms and that are in a way alienated from pedagogy and assessment. And here when he's mentioning environment and the climate crisis. So examples from countries' commitments, and these are the commitments that were finalized at the end by consensus and that the countries will be working on throughout this year through 2022, the other ISTP. Canada, for example, strengthening Indigenous education through pre-service training and ongoing professional learning. And these are only examples. I'm just including one out of the many commitments that were mentioned. Czech Republic, focus on the undergraduate teacher training reform. Estonia, working to get towards greater equity. Finland, ensuring that the entire educational pathway from early childhood education and care to higher education is better taken into account when developing the educational system, drawing on research-based knowledge. Germany, strengthening schools and teachers in the age of digitalization through professionalization. China, reduced students' homework and private tutoring burden while extending after-school service from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. in every school and for every child. Poland, developing holistically climate and ecological education programs, providing professional support for teachers in this area. And I personally find this very important. Portugal, to develop joint strategies and policy measures to enhance the attractiveness and rejuvenation of the teaching profession, namely by improving regulatory tools that amplify professional stability and by promoting a national campaign on the relevance of the teaching profession. They are strengthening the way the community and governments view the teaching profession. Singapore, build excellence across multiple pathways, recognizing that every child is unique and needs different approaches to find joy in learning, introducing more flexibility for students to customize their learning to learn at their own pace. Slovenia, written agreement on cooperation in the implementation of content-wise commitments within the National Recovery and Resilience Plan. Spain, facilitating tools and flexibility to teachers for the implementation of a competency-based curriculum that allows for a whole child with an inclusive perspective. Sweden, establishing a CPD, continuous professional development program for teachers based on scientific knowledge and proven experience. Switzerland, dealing with change. In change processes, teachers are involved in the decision-making process, and I find this very important and needed in so many countries around the world. England, the Department for Education and Teaching Unions are committed to promoting and supporting education settings to develop holistic, whole school or college approaches to mental health and well-being. Scotland developed a national pedagogical approach to the blended use of IT platforms in delivering effective teaching and learning, with a particular focus on supporting learners from disadvantaged backgrounds. United States, improving systems and supporting that value and elevating educators as respected professionals, support, recruit, retain, and diversify our teaching profession. And that was the end of the report. So how can such convening and such commitments inspire us? The focus here of inquiries in our schools are definitely inspired by this report and by the ISTP, intentional collaborations, teacher professionalism and well-being, and whole child education equity. And here we ask very important questions. To what extent are we giving attention to the connection of our internal community, small school community, to the external community? So it's the school, it's the local teacher union within the country, the ministry, and then the global organizations. Are we often contributing to official discussions and surveys for improvement? And I have seen that happening so many times when a school would receive a survey targeted for improvement, and then these surveys were neglected because they are seen as not important or not as important as the teaching taking place in the classes. Which of the three are we paying attention to the most? And are we neglecting any of the three? And of course, I leave more questions for you. You are encouraged to write these questions in the comments if you find this important, sharing your own thoughts and your own perspectives. So the driving conclusion question here: how can our school contribute to local and global discussions for quality education and equity for all? It's a call for leaders in the schools, for head teachers, to participate and provide their perspectives regarding these two very important things. And at the end, I like to end it this way: a convening may not solve all our concerns, but it can drive reflection and action. To solve issues at grassroots level, transparency must come first, reflection must come second. That's when conscious actions can confidently step in. Let's stay in orbit, let's develop and grow.